So I've been talking about how we're going to go over this for a couple weeks now, so we're finally here. I'm going to be explaining layer blending modes. Bear in mind that there's a lot of other ways blending modes can be affected. If you've seen by now in Photoshop, if you use color, you can still apply blending modes just the same, right, with a brush. So these can apply in so many different ways, all right? And I've told you before that I really encourage you guys to experiment with these because it's a really great way to try to get those down so you can actually use them in practice besides just learning what they are, right? It'd be really great to be able to use them in your workflow. So let's begin. So I'm going to be showing you essentially how these are combining throughout the whole lecture. I'm using the same two images. We have this initial photograph here. It's the same on both sides, okay? And what we're going to do is review how color and how different value will affect the picture depending on the layer blending mode, okay? Because they both will work differently, all right? So we're going to start with normal, a normal layer blending mode. This is what it's automatically set to when you use it, okay? And the normal blending modes is the default blending mode. So you can see here, what we're essentially doing, to explain one more time, is that this is being layered on top of that. So imagine in Photoshop, this is layered on top of this. The normal layer blending mode is just going to show the layer that's on top, right? It's not affecting what's underneath it. It's covering it 'cause it's opaque, all right? So these opaque pixels will cover the pixels directly below them without applying any kind of algorithm or math. You can, of course, reduce the opacity of these too, and you've seen how to do that already, of course, to reveal the pixels underneath it. The next one's called dissolve, and the dissolve blending mode also does not blend pixels. It only reveals pixels below if the opacity of the layer is reduced a little bit. And this is what's called a dither pattern. Essentially, it's replicating noise, right? Digital noise. And the intensity of the opacity will, of course, reduce or increase the visibility of the pixels below it. The next one's called the darken blending mode. This whole batch is the darkening blending modes, like I went over really briefly earlier. The darkening blending modes is like a collection of about 5 or 6 blending modes, where, as the name implies, the darken category will turn the result of the two layers darker. Anything white in the layer will become invisible in the blend layer, and anything darker than white is going to have some kind of darkening effect on the pixels below it. So this first selection is called darken, and the darken blending mode essentially looks at the luminance values in a hue. So we're not looking at the color, we're looking at how bright and dark they are. And it selects the darker color between the blend or the base layer. All right, so depending on which is darker, it selects that. And you can see how that's becoming clear here. White is essentially transparent, and as the colors get darker, we start losing more and more of that image, all right? If the blend and the base layer are the same, there is no change, right? There's nothing to change. Any questions so far? Okay, next is multiply. And multiply is one of the most popular blending modes in Photoshop. This blending mode multiplies the lumosity of the base layer by the blend color. It's a complicated way to say it does some math between those two, and the resulting color is always a darker color. Again, white will produce no change, and black pixels will always stay. Multiply can produce many different levels of darkening depending on the lumosity values of the blend layer, the layer on top, okay? Which makes it a great blending mode for darkening images, creating shadows, things like that. Multiply is really great for The next one is called color burn. The color burn blending mode gives you an even darker result than the multiply by increasing the contrast between the base, which is the image, and the blend, which is either the value or this color on top, resulting in a highly saturated midtones and reduced highlights. It's going to make your blacks really black. It's going to make all of those middle grays super vibrant, and it reduces the highlights. The result is pretty similar to the effect you would get when using the burn tool. All right, if you overburn something, it starts doing this. It starts turning kind of red, and you can start pushing out these kind of colors that aren't actually present. Okay. Next is called linear burn, and linear burn decreases the brightness of the base color based on the value of the blend. So if the value on top, the second layer, is darker than the base layer, then that brightness is decreased based on those numbers. So the result is a darker than multiplied, but less saturated than the color burn, all right? A little darker than multiply still, but less saturated. Linear burn also produces the most contrast in darker colors than any other blending modes in the darker group. The last one of the darkening blending mode is called darker color. Darker color is very similar to darken, which is the first one we reviewed here. This blending mode does not blend pixels. It compares the base and the blend colors and keeps the darkest of the two. All right, moving on. The next selection of blending modes here is called the lightening blending mode group. And the first one here is lighten. And the lightening blending mode takes a look at the base color and the blend color, and it keeps whichever of the two is lighter. That's simple. If the blend color and the base color are the same, there is no change applied. Next is screen. If you remember when I did the image where I composited bubbles onto the portrait, this was what I used for that. And what screen does, it's probably another one of the most popular blending modes on Photoshop, if not the most in my opinion. The resulting color is always a brighter color, and black produces no change, while the brighter pixels remain, okay? Screen can produce many different levels of brightening depending on the luminosity levels of the blend layer, the brightness of those pixels, making a screen. So it's a great blending mode for brightening images or creating highlights. And that's why we were able to get our bubbles to look like they were lit by the sun and floating in midair there. The next one is color dodge. This color dodge blending mode gives you a brighter effect than screen. And it does that by decreasing the contrast between the base and the blend colors. So it decreases the contrast between the two. It makes them both more similar to each other, resulting in saturated midtones and overblown highlights, which you can see here. And this effect is very similar to what you would achieve by using the dodge tool to brighten an image, okay? So I've talked before how the burn tool can sometimes make things turn kind of black or orange. The dodge tool can make things look kind of yellow or blown white, just like you can see how this building looks here. Okay, that orange color is essentially gone. Next is linear dodge, and it's similar but stronger than the screen blending mode or the color dodge blending mode. Much, much stronger, much more intense. Blending with black, of course, produces no change. And it's essentially just highly increasing, brightening the base color. to reflect the blend color, right? So you can see here how the black isn't really making much of a difference, but the second there's this littlest bit of white added, it's highly changing the base layer. And next is called lighter color. Again, very, very similar to lighten. Bear in mind, this blending mode does not mix pixels. It's not blending them. It only compares the base and the blend, and it keeps the brightest of the two. Just the same with darken and darker color, or lighten and lighter color. Darken and lighten only looks at the value of the colors, whereas darker color and lighter color is also taking that RBG value into consideration, but they're very similar, okay? Next are the contrast blending modes. Overlay is the blending mode that we will select for non-destructive dodging and burning, which I showed you really briefly on the picture earlier today, by starting with a 50% gray. The thing with the contrast blending modes is that they are essentially a category that's a mixture of the darken and lighten blending modes. They create contrast by both lightening and darkening the resulting colors by using complementary blending modes to create a blend. Photoshop checks to see if colors are darker than 50% gray or lighter than 50% gray, and if the colors are darker, then a darkening blending mode is applied, and if the colors are brighter, a brighter blending mode is applied. All right, so that's what this is. So this first one is overlay, and again, it's probably one of the most widely used blending modes on the screen and overlay here. It is a combination of multiply and screen. All right, so real intense darkness, real nice brightness, okay? With the base layer always shining through. Overlay uses the screen blending mode at half strength on colors brighter than 50% gray. And it uses the multiply blending mode at half strength at colors darker than 50% gray, while 50% gray itself becomes transparent. All right, so just think about, the best way to think about overlays by thinking about shifting midtones. The dark blend colors shift midtones to darker colors, and light tones shift midtones brighter, okay? So it really will create some nice contrast if you have a pretty gray picture without any extreme brights or darks. Before I go on to the next one, one of the main differences between the overlay blending mode and the other contrast blending modes is that it makes calculations based on the brightness of the colors of the base layer. It's looking at the picture first. All other contrast blending modes make their calculations based on the brightness of the blend layer. They're looking at the second layer. All right. So overlay is our next, soft light is our next one. You can see the difference between overlay and soft light. It is very much like overlay. It applies either a darkening or lightening effects depending on the luminance values, but in a much more subtle way, right? You can think of soft light as a softer version of overlay without harsh contrast. All right, so soft light is a softer version of overlay. And then we have vivid light and hard light. And you can think of those as an extreme version of soft light or overlay. Anything darker than 50% gray is highly darkened. Anything lighter is really lightened, as you can see. Generally speaking, this is one of those kind of blending modes where keeping it at 100% opacity is like way too strong regularly, okay? Next is linear light, and linear light uses a combination of linear dodge blending on the lighter pixels and linear burn on darker pixels. Typically, all you have to really understand about the linear light, and generally speaking, the more you go down the list of contrast blending modes, the more extreme that contrast becomes. With exception to soft light. Soft light's really, really soft. But the colors are extreme, and again, you may want to use opacity to try to adjust the contrast that comes out of this. And lastly, and you can see how these are all still really highly contrasted. And last is hard mix that I want to review. And hard mix is a blending mode where the resulting image loses a ton of detail. It's practically posturized, so the colors can only be black, white, or any of the 6 primary colors. Hard mix. The resulting images lose a lot of detail, and the colors can only be black, white, or any of the 6 primary colors. To review, those colors are red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, or yellow. That's all that the colors will use here. Vivid light is an extreme blending mode. All right, again, you might want to use opacity to reduce its effect. All right, this next category of blending modes are called inversion blending modes. And inversion blending modes look for variations between the base and the blend layers to create a blend. All right, so first we have difference, and difference blending mode uses the difference of the base and the blend pixels to produce a color. So white inverts the base layer, and it's the same as inverting the colors on the base layer by actually inverting it as a command, right? Which is a standard command inversion. Black produces no change. White inverts, black produces no change, okay? And this can be really useful for blending as a blending mode for things that have really similar content. Next is exclusion. Exclusion is similar difference in some ways. The blending with white layers inverts the base color values, while blending with black produces no change. All right, so again, you can see how these how the black section has no change, the white section is being inverted, and the variety here is between how that middle gray is affecting the image. Next is subtract. Subtract essentially subtracts pixel values from the base layer. It usually drastically darkens pixels by subtracting brightness. And you can see that really clearly here by our brightest color wheel being almost totally void of information, as well as this whitened section here, kind of a black void. Notice how the light areas of the gradient are almost pure black, right? While the dark areas produce a minimal change. So that's how this will really affect that. Next one is divide, which produces the opposite effect as subtract. White has no effect this time instead of black. And only the blend values get darker. The results get brighter. So as the blend layer is getting darker on the top here, you can see it going from white to black on that left side. It's producing a brighter and brighter effect. All right, and the last one here I want to review is the component blending modes. The first one is hue. The hue blending mode preserves the luminosity and saturation of the base pixels. So it's not removing the value, it's not making it brighter or darker. And what it does is it adopts the hue of the blend pixels. What this means is that the second layer is pushing the hue towards a certain direction, all right? When I mentioned earlier how sometimes I might use a paintbrush on hue, for example, one of the first times I found this to be really helpful for me is when I shot someone for a headshot and she was mad sunburned, like so badly. And so what I did was I selected a color with my paintbrush that was on the more orange side of a skin color and less on the pinkish red side of a skin color. And I pushed the hue towards that, and I essentially was able to paint out that sunburn by just making her look more of a natural tan color, all right, by like pushing the hue towards orange and out of red, all right. This can be a way to make Maybe you think your water is just a little too cyan and you want to make it more blue, right? You can push it that way. You can do it to apply rouge to cheeks or lipstick, right? Like there's like a lot of ways that this can be really helpful here. Saturation preserves the luminosity and the hue of the base layer, but it adopts the saturation of the layer above it. It's essentially adding saturation level influenced by the top. The black and white layer will turn the image grayscale because none of the pixels in the luminosity layer have a saturation. That's why that one on the left is black and white. It's looking specifically at color and the saturation of that color. All right. Next is what's called color. Again, a really easy way to do things like apply lipstick, make trees look greener, right? Something like that. You can push and add color, especially this way, make eyes look bluer or whatever. So the color blending mode preserves the luminosity of the base layer, aka the value, how bright or dark it is, and adopts the hue and saturation of the blend layer. So whatever the layer is on top will affect the hue and saturation of the colors underneath it. Color is the ideal blending mode for coloring monochromatic images, right? If you've seen people who color in black and white pictures, they're doing it with this blending mode. All right. And then lastly here we have what's called luminosity. And luminosity preserves the hue and saturation of the base layer while adopting the luminosity of the blend layer. So you can see here that our oranges of the building or the blue of the sky are still present, but they're referring to the luminosity of the colors in the wheels here or here. This is sometimes a rare way I might try to add light to something. All right. Are there any questions? Okay. I just want to review a couple more things. All right, and some of these are things that we went over last week, but I just want to review them a little bit more. So last week you saw that we edited this picture online. Oh, my screen's doing something really crazy. Can you guys see that up there? No. And I wanted to just review a couple things and go over a couple more things. The first thing I want to review is image size and canvas size. That's under the image drop-down menu. You're going to want to use this if you're ever trying to size an image to print it or what have you. Okay, we did review last week how to export a picture to be the proper size for the internet, right? Which was file, export, save for web. It's for the internet, a web browser. Really easy way to like compress something and send in an email or to upload online. But if you're going to be printing something, you want to make sure it fits your paper. So you would check first by looking at the image size here. You can see it's 8 inches by 5.35, all right? And the resolution is at 200, so super small, a little lower mid-resolution size. And we have this checkbox here called resample. So you can see here that if I were to change this, it will stay proportional, right? 8 by 12, okay? And you can see here how the resolution is lower to compensate for the fact that it's larger, right? So it works kind of as a proportional scale. The larger you get, the less resolution you'll have. The smaller you get, the higher the resolution is. And generally speaking, that's an okay way to work. Our eyes see at 300 dpi, all right? We can't really see better than that. It's pretty rare too. And the larger the picture is, the less resolution it absolutely has to have because you're looking at it from farther away. That's kind of the rule of thumb there. Of course, the highest resolution is always the most desirable. Going under 300s, something you want to avoid at all costs. So if I were to make this larger and I'm worried about preserving the integrity of the picture, I might do what's called a resample. And what resampling does is it maintains the amount of pixels that are present as you enlarge or compress your picture, okay? And I'll show you what this means. So you saw before when I changed this to 8, this one to whatever it was, 133.3 repeating. If I click resample and I make that 8, you can see that it stays at 200, which means it's just making everything more, as opposed to compensating proportionally between the two. I try to do this as little as possible because I always worry about compromising the integrity of my picture, making something pixelated or compressed in the wrong way. Okay, so we'll say okay to that. Now we have our, larger picture. And the other aspect to this here is canvas size. And canvas size has to do with essentially, if you think about the picture being printed on a piece of paper, image size is how big the picture is, and canvas size is how big the paper is, if that makes sense, okay? So what I mean is, let's say we want to have an inch border around our print, okay? So this is 8 by 12. If I want an inch on each side, that's 2 additional inches, right? So I'm going to do 10 by 14. I can, of course, influence, if I just want to extend the page to one side, you can, of course, select that by doing this. But I want this to be proportional. I want the background to be white. All right, and now you can see that I've made a proportional inch border around my picture. When you do start printing, having a border or not having a border is artist's choice. I've always been a fan of borderless printing. However, I don't do it that often anymore because I need a place to touch it and hold it without ruining the print. So sometimes I might keep a border on my print until I'm about to display it, and then I might cut that off to make that edge-to-edge print. Otherwise, you might stick your thumb in something, right? Important. All right. We went over selection modifications last time. For sake of showing again, a quick selection modification review here. Let's just select our figure here, and we'll say we won't select the background. Okay, so we have, let's remove some of this. Oh, it is not working with me today, guys. Okay, so we have our figure selected, and I've kept the background out for a reason. And again, I say this almost every tutorial. If I were doing this for an actual edit for someone, I would be going way slower than this. But for sake of a quick sample, I'm going to just do this for you. So I have our figure selected here, and let's say I want to change the background. So the select drop-down menu, inverse, okay? And now I have everything but the figure selected, okay? So I selected the figure to select the background by inversing my selection. I don't want this white part here, so I removed that, and now we just have our ugly background. And I can see parts here where it's not fully selected, but again, for the sake of the sample, we'll work with that. So what I normally do if I'm going to make a change to something is I will expand my selection, maybe by just a pixel. Nothing's worse than making an edit when you have a small halo you have to go back and do with a brush. And feathering, okay? So I'm going to feather this. Since it's a kind of low resolution picture, I'm going to only do like 2 or 3 pixels. I usually work around 5. And now it's going to make any kind of change a little less hard. I'm going to make a new layer here and a layer mask from that. Okay, so we've gone over masking, and I might have done that a little fast. I made a new layer by pushing the plus sign, and then I hit this layer mask sign to create a mask around what I have edited here, which I've selected here, which is just the background. And now if I were to do something such as, I don't know, change the color of the background, I'll make a clipping mask by attaching it here, and I can change the colors of that selection there. Oh, let me apply this also. There you go. Okay, and then if I wanted to, okay, let me turn this off. If I wanted to, let's say I'm trying to frame this for some strange reason, because sometimes people want this. I don't know, maybe you're gonna be making Christmas ornaments one day or something. And you just want this picture here, okay? I could, again, make a layer and mask this. Now you can see here how I have only that selected as my mask, is what's inside, and I could fill the outside. I'm gonna invert it because I want to fill the outside image. Edit, fill, and we'll just pick a color. Oops. And now I have my image. Of course, what was ideal, be going to the edges here, framed by that mask, okay? And this is just to review how like simple masking can really be to change the shape of something or the color of something here. To move a mask, so let's say I have this here and this edit did not work, right? I can select this mask and I can copy a mask by holding Alt and dragging. Yes, we want to replace that layer mask, and now we can see how that mask has affected only the background here, and how we could go back and fix it up. So maybe you can see here how it's gotten some of the hair. We have a little spot here. Being that it's a mask, I can remove it by simply using some black, and I would go in here and I'd remove this part here that happened. I could perhaps get rid of this where that hair didn't work quite properly. And then of course I can go down just a little bit more to try to fix what happened with this part here. And make her hair not purple. And you can see here that I'm working with the mask at 65%. I'm not working at 100 because I don't want to have a super horrible edge here. So I'm going back and forth between black and white, adding and removing to try to make this look as natural as possible by pushing that and pulling it until it makes sense as a final result. There's still a little bit of purple haloing going on here that I would try to recover. All right, and now you can see how that edit looks much more natural than it would otherwise. All right, so copying masks, we did that, and the layer mask on. All right, so the last thing I want to review here, I guess, is a couple of the sharpening filters. We've gone over them briefly, but I want to just review them one more time. Those are going to be under here. You can see that Sharpen has some. There's also a really good, if not the best sharpening filter, in my opinion, under Other. So we're going to review a couple of those really quickly. One of the ways that you can sharpen it is simply by looking in the sharpen filters. Unsharp mask is a pretty decent one to work with. It will apply it to the picture as a sample for you, and you can decide how much you want it to be sharpened and how much you want that radius or that spacing between the black and the white on your edges to be. Too much radius makes people look like a cartoon, so be careful with how high you turn that up. This looks highly edited and fake, right? So you want to be really careful of not trying to touch up your people that way or anything that way, really. But just a little bit of edit is absolutely fine. And, you know, again, this has to be something you're really careful with too, but the radius in particular, I think, can really affect something. So that's working fine for me. That's okay. And you can see the difference between those two by toggling back and forth. I could perhaps make a mask out of this. Oh, let me put that background back up. I can make a mask out of this, right? So I applied a layer mask. And I could, normally how I would honestly work with this is I would invert my mask to start at 0, and I would paint on my sharpening where I'd want it the most because it was a pretty high sharpening. So maybe what would I do? I might fill it at white at 15%. We got a little bit of sharpening going on. You can see how this isn't black anymore because I have my mask starting to fill. And now I'm going to use white. We'll use it at 46%. Why not? Let's see. I'll try to make her eyes nice and sparkly, right? Maybe add a little bit of dimension here. Maybe try to get her hair to look nice and separated. All right, maybe just do another really nice, like, over her hair, over her sweater. Well, actually, now that I went over her sweater, I think the sweater's a little distracting. I'll push that back a little bit. All right. All right, and now you can see here where I've painted on that sharpening filter here, so you can see my little thumbnail. And as I toggle back and forth, that sharpening looks a little more natural. And a little less cartoonish. Another really great way to sharpen is by using what's high pass. So first I'm going to make a copy of my layer. You can do that by pushing Command J or by going to Control click, duplicate layer, right click, duplicate layer, right? These are all methods. And I'm going to do what's called high pass. Filter, other, high pass. High pass is a generally pretty popular one that's used for sharpening. What it does is it finds the edges of things based on hue and value, and it makes those edges more contrasting. And you can see here how it's finding those edges. And you can see here how it's kind of like making a radiant light around this. That's a little too much, so I'm going to bring it down just a little bit more. And push OK. And what do we think we would change this to in order to make this blending mode make sense? Any of the contrast blending modes. So specifically, I think overlay usually works really well. Soft light's a little less strong. The other ones are going to get really cartoonish because of how contrasting they are. Overlay is a pretty popular one. Soft light's actually doing a great job with this picture. But you can see here how that's sharpening some of those areas here. And again, I would probably make this a mask and I would remove it on some places that seem too extreme. Like her glasses, dude. Her glasses are just burning my eyeballs. Maybe a little bit around this edge where we have that haloing going on. That's much, much better. Right? What else would I do? Well, being that she's a woman, normally people would not want their wrinkles highly sharpened, and it's pretty sharpened here. So I would also just probably remove some of this sharpening on her face to make her skin a little softer, a little smoother. And like I mentioned before, probably another one of the best ways to really work with this here is to start with it inverted and then painting on where you would want it the most. Probably the easiest to have control on it in a picture like this. So, and now I've kind of just made it on the eyes. You can see here where I've removed it on her face and on her skin. And I would also just bring down the opacity of this a little bit to make it just a little less intense, but still nicely sharpened, right? So this is with high pass. And this is with the unsharp mask. So you can see how different and similar that they are. And I encourage that you use both when you're trying to sharpen a picture to make it just clarify a little bit the finish. Depending on what the image is of, it can make huge differences. So if you're working on a landscape, the difference between those two might be incomparable and you already know which one's best for you. So try that. Do we have any questions? Okay, I'm going to start a very simple, basic composite, just to start to go over compositing. We're going to go over a little bit more next time, okay? But now we're using masking and we can start seeing how compositing might make some sense. So let's start a new document. We'll just keep it standard, okay? And I'm just going to go off of ideas for you guys to Google images, download them, and try to make something out of it, okay? And you can see how simple it is to kind of produce whatever picture you want to produce. And that's what I'm going to ask you to do for class today, is to make one composite with at least 5 elements added into it, okay? So let's start with a doctor's headshot. Okay, and I'll just pick something random. I picked doctors for this start because I know they usually have a collar, and that would make giving them a different head a lot easier. So we're going to start with that. He looks official. Let's use him. So I'm going to download this guy. Actually, let me look for the largest pictures. Oh, great. He's large. Okay, so I'll take him. And let's open him up here. All right, so let's start by selecting him and putting him onto our board, okay? I'll use the quick selection tool here and select this guy. Luckily, the background isn't too similar, so hopefully it's easy enough to separate him in a nice, natural way. Come on. All right, let me just go in here and make sure I get his whole shoulder. All right, and I'm just checking through this part where his hair is and stuff to make sure I have this selected as well as possible. And for the assignment, maybe don't do what I'm doing and pick somebody with a higher contrasting background to the figure. That'll really help you. All right. Okay, so this is good enough for me for now. I reviewed how I use these modification tools, right? I'm going to expand it by 1 pixel because this is probably pretty small. I took it from the internet. And I'm going to modify it by feathering it 3 pixels. And hopefully we have this whole guy. I'm going to take the move tool and drag him onto this. And I can see here I actually really hate the modification. I'm going to review that. Let me just make sure my history, I don't have that. So I'm going to feather him again. He must be a smaller image than I realized. Okay, and I'm actually going to expand it. I mean, contract it by a pixel because I saw a ring around the image last time and I do not want that. All right, so this will do the trick for me here. Let's put him in a place. Where should we put him? In a hot tub. All right, so we'll see how well we can do that, being the fact that he is so zoomed in. Ooh, we'll do him like that. Perfect. Okay, so let's put him in the pool with these people. All right, this is a really pixelated picture. He's going to be a little larger than them, but let's do it. It's going to tell us they're not the same size. Oh, they are. Okay. Command T is the transform tool, the same thing as going to edit transform. Okay, and I'm going to scale him down a little bit so that he can maybe fit into the hot tub a little better. I'm going to look at his face, make him proportionally the same size as this beautiful woman and her companion here in the hot tub with him. All right, so, and we'll have him hanging out over here, all right? So we're gonna end up maybe putting him here, all right? And the discrepancies against the quality of the pictures here, we'll just ignore for sake, okay? So what I would probably do next is I would make a mask out of our doctor now, and I would mask him out in places that would make sense for this hot tub. So first I'm going to remove him here. And then you can see here how I have a feathered edge. I'm going to keep that and just bring down this opacity a little bit and maybe just make him seem a little bit more like he's fallen into the tub by pushing this back and forth. I start kind of pushing him a little more into the water. All right. Okay, so we're getting here. I think that if I were to try to somehow pretend this is actually a convincing image, I would change the white balance a little bit for him. So I'm going to attach it to him by making a clipping mask. I'm holding Alt. And now my white balance will only affect him. We can try to put him a little more in this nighttime kind of color that they're in now. That's a little more similar. Yeah. All right, so now we have that ugly artificial lighting that we're reflecting in him. I'm going to just make the highlights a little bit more blue. I think that that's more like what they look like. All right, so now if I had not made this clipping mask, that white balance layer would be affecting the whole image. But since I clipped it to his picture, it's just affecting his figure. Okay. All right, so let's give him another face. Throw me something. Okay, dog. Let's give him a dog head. Let's see if we can find something that would make sense to cut out. And let me see his picture one more time. All right, it's pretty straight on side neck going on here. So we'll we'll do this one. Let me download this. And I'll open it. And I'm going to select Doggo's face, okay, as well as I can. Unfortunately, now that I see it closer up, I can see how this ear is falling out of focus, which will change things a little bit, but we're still going to go for it. We're going to give him a dog head. All right, so I'm going to over-select just a little bit because now that I'm working with masking, I know I'll just end up masking out the parts that aren't correct. So I'll go to that part there. And we're going to drag his face onto this. So again, Command, transform, make him a little smaller. And I'm just going to I'm going to start comparing the dog's neck to his neck a little bit to try to make that a simple transformation. Okay, let's see if we can do this. I'm just gonna say that this will work for me now, okay? And what I'm gonna do is first, just to make sure I don't lose this guy, I'm going to copy him. All right, I don't wanna lose him, and I'm gonna put this layer up there for now. And I'm going to well, I'm going to remove his face. So okay. So you can see here I'm starting to make this easier for myself and to organize this and make my workflow as easy as possible. So I'm going to take this copy of my doctor and I'm going to mask out his face. Oh, let's make that brighter. And to make it easier, let's just select it. And I'll remove, oh, make sure you're on the mask. Okay. All right, so now he has no head. And we're gonna try to stick Doggo on there. So now we have the doctor not there, all right? And we're going to move our dog head over. I'm going to reduce the opacity a little bit just to try to line up his neck a little bit. I'm going to just make him a little bit smaller too to try to make that somehow natural. And I'm going to align the dog's head with that. Okay. And I'm going to, again, make a mask out of that dog now. And I'm going to bring up my hardness just a little bit because I'm starting to do some smaller editing. And I'm going to remove this here where I can see the dog is overlapping with the doctor's collar. All right, and if I turn this on now, we can see that he has a little dog head. I think that it's a little small, but again, what's natural about this anyway? I'm gonna make this a little bigger just to try to make his head not look super, super weird. Okay, so now he has dog head, and I'm going to apply this to the doctor figure here to try to make that match a little more. There you go. And let's, for one more thing, we'll do, all right, so we went over this last time with the bubbles, but I'll just do it again. Bubbles on black background, fire on black background. All of those can be added to an image by using one of the lightning blending modes, which will remove the black from the picture. Let's, oh, screw it, we'll use this. It's gonna come right out of that tub because these are so real looking. All right, so we'll do one of these, and let's just get a fire in here too, or a cloud. All right, yeah, we'll do this. And you can see why there's a lot of them when I'm looking them up, and that's because editing something in on a black background is extremely common in Photoshop. I can do clouds next week, actually. I already have that prepared. Okay, so let's let me open those. And I'm going to just select the part that doesn't say vector stock. And I'm going to drag those over to our tub. I'm going to make this a little smaller. All right, and now we have this, I guess, whirlwind of bubbles coming out. I don't know. And I'm going to put my blending mode on something like lighten or screen in order to make those kind of stick out. We can maybe move them over a little bit because this is the most real thing in the world. So now we got some bubbles coming out of our jacuzzi, and we can and then the fire I was going to also do. So fire is essentially the exact same thing here. We're going to move this into here. I'm transforming it smaller. I actually want the fire behind everybody. So we'll put a little fake fire maybe over here. Since there's light over there, I'm just going to put it there because that kind of makes some sense to me. And then again, I'm going to change this to screen. And now we have this super realistic floating fire in the background. But you can see how this can just keep going, right? The main things to remember being having a nice feather, trying to make sure you match your color, and experimenting, right? You know, I could cut out the hot tub and the doctor and the dog and put them into outer space. Now you have a floating hot tub in outer space, right? And you can just keep going that way. And that's what I'm going to ask you to do. Like I said, for your class assignment today, I want you to make a picture. I'll make a discussion board for it where you're compositing 3 items into a picture, okay? And as you can see by my sample, I don't care how outrageous it is. I want you to try to make things look as realistic as possible with whatever elements you choose. So if you're going to be throwing lightning in the background, go ahead and look up lightning on a black background and start putting that in your picture, and you can make your people superheroes that are making fire and thunder or whatever, right? I'm going to want you to do that this week, all right, for class. Are there any questions? Okay.